So welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to have you all here today. I'm Susanna Rojas, Territory Account Manager here at Qumulo. I'm thrilled to be your host for this exciting discussion. Today, we're proud to announce the general availability of Azure native Qumulo Scalable File Service, also known as A&Q. We'll be diving into the world of scalable file service and exploring what the hybrid future holds for businesses like yours. We'll be talking about the importance of scaling your workloads anywhere your business requires in a cost-effective way. And we'll be sharing some valuable insights into how our customers are leveraging the Azure native Qumulo Scalable File Service to power their workloads in the cloud. Joining us for this insightful discussion, we have an incredible panel of experts from Qumulo, Microsoft, and one of our valued customers, Hi-Res Studios. So to kick things off, I'd like to invite each one of our panelists, give an introduction to yourself, give us a little bit of background about you and your current title today. So Karan, I will hand it over to you first.
Thank you, Susanna. Hi, everyone. Thanks a lot for taking the time out of your day to attend this event. I see a lot of familiar names, both customers, prospects, and partners out there. Thank you for taking the time. My name is Kiran Bageshpur. For those of you who do not know me, I'm the Chief Technology Officer here at Qumulo, which means that I'm responsible for all things product development and product management. Very excited to be here to share with you in greater detail what the team has done over the last year or so, to show you a demo and certainly have a conversation with our partner at Microsoft, as well as one of our customers who's been an adopter of Azure native Qumulo. So with that, how about I turn it over to Vamshi, who is our partner from Microsoft. You want to introduce yourself, Vamshi?
Thanks, Kiran. Hi, folks. My name is Vamshi Kamneni. I lead product management for Azure's object storage platform known as Azure Blob Storage. And again, like what Kiran said, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come spend the time with us. We're excited about Azure native Qumulo and the GA of the service that we've been working on together for quite a while now. And we're really excited to bring that to market, to talk about what makes it unique, why we think it solves real customer pain and problems. And hopefully we'll have a good conversation today, and look forward to your questions and engagement.
Thank you, Vamshi. Bob, hand it over to you.
I can get my video started here. Thanks, Susanna. Good to meet all of you. Pleasure to being here. I'm Robert Bousquet. Some know me as Bob. I'm the VP of IT operations here at Hi-Res. And I'll be speaking a little bit on the Qumulo scalable file service that we've been using on Azure for a while now. It's been a great experience so far. So,
thank you, Bob. Dak, hand it over to you.
Hello, Dak Bush, Senior Director of Cloud here at Qumulo. I've been at Qumulo for around 4 years. Throughout that entire tenure, I've been involved in all aspects of our cloud business, with a lot of focus in the last year on getting Azure native Qumulo to market. So excited to talk with you all more about this product and how we can help your workloads on Azure.
Thank you, Dak. So before we kick it off, we do want to make this very interactive. So we do have a Q&A. So if you guys have any questions throughout the conversation, please feel free to send a question over and we will try to address it as we go along. So I will kick it off. So Karan, data has been a challenge for organizations and enterprises for decades. What's different about it now? Maybe you can walk us through a little history, where it has been, where it is today, and what's driving that growth.
That's a great question, Susanna. I'd love to go do that. For one reason or the other, I have been involved with large-scale unstructured data for, boy, I'd say 15, 16 plus years. So I've had this sort of pleasure of seeing our customers' uses of data really grow in a substantial way. Just a little bit of history lesson out here. And many of the customers and prospects we have online kind of have lived this through too. If you go back to, boy, I'd say 2005, 2006 time period, the massive volumes of data in the world was still structured data. It is stuff that lived in a database, right? And I think it is right about 2007 that the initial reports started to come out that the volume of unstructured data, i.e. things living outside a database, things living as files or object, because the earliest parts of the cloud were being born right about then, started to overtake. This is also the period when, storage in the enterprise went from being scale up, which was in the 1990s when you had, essentially tens of thousands of files and gigabytes to terabytes of data, to a world where you had hundreds of millions of files, which was kind of astonishingly large number back then, and hundreds of terabytes to a petabyte of data, right? That is kind of the era. I'd say 2007, 2008 onwards was the beginning of that, big data world, if you will. We are now in a order of magnitude larger, maybe even 2 orders of magnitude larger. It is not uncommon for customers today to have not hundreds of millions, but hundreds of billions of files or objects. And you're talking about data sets like petabytes to tens of petabytes to hundreds of petabytes. And if you go into the cloud, you're talking about even larger volumes in the aggregate, but I'll let Vamshi talk about that. And this has been an interesting era. So the question becomes, what's driven that, right? And I have a little slide here which talks about that. And I'll let that stay there, but talk through this from a sort of personal visceral experience point of view. Let's take, variety of these workflows, and I can see from the audience that there is folks from every one of these verticals represented here, right? And then some. Media entertainment, you go back to the early 2000s when digitization started. Essentially, a full-blown feature film created about a terabyte of data, and they were sort of done on these Silicon Graphics Optane or Octane workstations. Today, it's not uncommon to do hundreds of terabytes per week of raw footage, out in distant locations. We had one customer tell us about 100 to 200 terabytes of data per week in disconnected locations in Hungary and Spain and so on and so forth, as they do real interesting takes, right? That's a big change. You're now talking about more data, 100x more data out at the edge than was present in the core and the entire movie, 20 years ago. Healthcare is another great example. You go back 15 years ago, and it was a really big deal to go get an MRI or a X-ray or even a CAT scan of any sort. Today, we've got sort of a world where customers are sort of generating a much larger volume of healthcare data, mostly because it's gotten so affordable. In fact, in many of the cities, you can go for $1,000 or so and get a full body MRI, and that is maintained. And that's kind of, again, what's driving this sort of growth in data. Ditto with video surveillance. It's all over the place today. Our folks in UK were the earliest who 10 years plus ago started to have CCTV cameras at every street corner. It's kind of present as a key part of physical security. And the one I love the best is actually about life sciences, where go back to the early 2000s and you actually only had, the first genome being sequenced, and that cost $1.5 billion, which is insane. And today, for less than $1,000, you can get a full sequence of a human being. And by the way, the amount of data generated just in the last 3 years as a consequence of the pandemic and the fact that everybody was being tested is just mind-boggling. And it's possible because the cost of data acquisition has substantially reduced and the use of that data has exploded in a variety of different ways. So that's kind of the sort of top level view of it. And so we now today live in what I would call as the scale anywhere era, right? The data sets have grown from, a small filer to a bunch of clusters in a data center to data everywhere at the edge of a customer network, in the core, in traditional filers, and most certainly in the cloud. But I want to stop here and ask Vamshi to talk about, hey, Azure, and what's the growth in Azure been like? Because you've been through this entire time period, Vamshi.
Yeah, no, there's great comments, Kiran, and it's funny. Like I think, like you have been privileged to have sort of a ringside seat at this growth of data and growth of cloud computing. I remember starting as an engineer in 2007 in what we call Project Red Dog at the time, where we had a couple of racks of servers in a lab and a dream, and now we're in the many tens of millions of servers in so many regions around the world. So it's been an amazing journey. And I think, what you're talking about with the explosion of data and all of that has really kind of happened in, if you look over an arc, it's been inevitable, but it wasn't obvious at the time, right? I remember back in 2015, 2016, even talking to customers, and they were just starting to look at the cloud and starting to look at it, hey, like maybe I can put my backups there, maybe I can do my DR there. I might be running a couple of cloud native applications, and these were generating data, but not necessarily substantial amounts of data, and it was unusual in that 2015 timeframe to have customers with more than a petabyte stored in the cloud in object storage, which is the canonical storage platform for the cloud. But that's completely changed now. We have thousands and tens of thousands of customers with more than a petabyte of data. To your point, many customers in the tens of petabytes of data, trending to hundreds of petabytes of data, and we even have our first few exabyte scale customers, which is amazing to kind of see and say. And what's more fundamental is how much the nature of the data has changed, right? From sort of like cold data, archive data, to what is much more active today. Of course, we have cloud native applications are the default application today. So there's a lot of sort of signal and data and analysis generated from these applications that continues to grow. People do, of course, continue to use the cloud for backups and archives, but there's been a rise of these classes of applications that are much more active. A good example is all of the data around, sort of big data and analytics, right? I mean, this 5-6 years ago, big data and cloud scale analytics was a bit of a buzzword. But you look today, so many enterprises have huge volumes of unstructured data that they bring into object storage, they analyze with Databricks or Snowflake or other analytics engines, and it's truly in the sort of petabyte scale, petabyte class data. Hundreds of terabytes to low petabytes a day of ingest per customer, and the analysis. And then you have much more recently this huge explosion of data that's being used for machine learning and AI use cases. People talk about how ML is all about the GPU, but it's also all about the data. You have to train those algorithms with huge reams of unstructured data, and then you need to have these models that are available for inferencing, for loading into the GPU. So the storage subsystem has becomes even more critical in those use cases as well. And we're just at the very infancy of that explosion of storage and storage usage.
Hey, Susanna, if I can just jump in, there was a great question that I want to address, which is around this. And the question was from one of our participants who said, can you also talk about the different shapes of data, specifically working with fewer numbers, but very large files? We typically work with single files that are 500 gigabytes to 10 terabytes. And this is slightly a different challenge in working with that shape of data in the cloud. Hey, we will get to this in detail, but the beauty of what we are talking about with Azure native Qumulo is it is file in the cloud. And so just like we have lots and lots of customers on premises working with these large files, which I don't know exactly what this particular gentleman is talking about from a use case point of view, but we see these files and these large files both in the M&E world, certainly in life sciences, and as well as in oil and gas, particularly subsurface modeling and so on. And we already work with that stuff on premises, and bringing Qumulo into the cloud means you can work with those sets of files in the cloud with your application doing exactly what it was doing on premise. But we'll get to the details on that there, but we've got you covered out there, sir. Okay, sorry for the interruption, but I'd love to go, turn it back to you, Susanna.
No worries. Thank you, guys. So Bob, thank you again for joining, and thank you for being a customer. But for the audience here, can you please give us some background on Hi-Res? Who Hi-Res is, what do you guys do, and maybe explain what Hi-Res does with Azure and Qumulo today.
Sure. So I'm sure we have some gamers here in this audience, hopefully. So Hi-Res has been in the gaming industry for 10 plus years now. So we're specifically more in the multiplayer type industry in the gaming space. We have games on PC and on consoles, Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo. And that's where we kind of live. Our biggest game that we've had in market is Smite. Some of you may have heard of that game. And we have some other games that are out there, some FPS games, and those are our Smite's our bread and butter. So that's our, if you guys are familiar with like Dota or anything like that, it's a MOBA. So a lot of fun to play. But how we've kind of really leveraged Qumulo. So it all kind of began back during the pandemic. We really needed to figure out a way how to kind of scale out as we were starting to support more people remotely. And so my teams internally, we kind of, we started looking at Azure. We had been working with Azure back in 2018. And, we started thinking about, well, how would our build infrastructure look like going into the, hybrid space? So we decided it's like we needed to start, taking our build farm, which is, traditionally was on-prem for us. And we had to basically take that system and we had to, put it into Azure. So we reiterated some things and changed our infrastructure around to support the our Azure environment. So we built everything. Our games are built on top of Incredibuild, and that does our code compilation for our games. And so what we do is our Incredibuild system actually pulls from Perforce repositories, and in the Incredibuild nodes in Azure, they will take takes all that data from our Perforce repositories, which is, we have depots for every game at Hi-Res. And once that code compilation is actually done with our Incredibuild system, we have to drop all that compiled code onto a storage system, and that's where Qumulo came in. So we had looked at several different options within Azure, and we looked at some very expensive options, and we looked at some cheaper options, and Qumulo kind of really fit the bill as far as like price, performance, and as far as ease of use. So it was really easy for us to get it set up within our environment in Azure, and we just hooked everything up. We're using NFS today to put NFS mounts on our Incredibuild systems. That way, when our code compilation is done, we'll just we'll transfer our data to our NFS points, and then from there we call our storage artifact system. So that, which is Qumulo, and then our users that are kind of abroad, we use a ZTN solution where users can actually get into, and then they can get connected to our build artifact storage with Qumulo system in order to pull that data, so they can pull that data back to their machines, whether that be abroad or on-site on our on-premise office, or within our dev data center. So so that's how we leverage it today. So we're moving, we build probably 8 to 16 times a day. We'll do partial builds, full builds, and Qumulo has really kind of shown us is like, how well it's been able to keep up with the demand of storage and leverage the type of bandwidth that we actually need in order to get files onto the system and be able to push that out to our employees. So it's done a great job, and my team has really loved the system. It does what it's supposed to do. It's been a great product.
Thank you there, Bob. Just a quick shout out from one of our participants said that I like the elephant god in Smite. So you've got players on the audience out there. But just following up on your discussion, it feels like you have very much the sort of hybrid workflow. You've got distributed teams as well as workflows both on premises and the cloud. Is that a fair statement?
That is a fair statement. Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, we are still leveraging fully like our infrastructure that we have on-prem. So we've fully adopted the hybrid environment. So it was just having to be able to support our users abroad. We had to have something in order to kind of reach out to our users, because one of the things that was great for us kind of moving into the remote world was there's better talent kind of across the world for us. So again, traditionally Hybrids had always hired folks kind of like in Georgia, but now being after the pandemics, like it made sense for us to reach talent from every corner of the world. So and then having Azure as that kind of a mediator in between where we could use them to kind of reach out to those employees with better peering points and be in other data centers around the world in order to have them to be able to get into our personal resource repository, be able to get into Qumulo to pull the data, to get the build data and those sorts of things. So cool.
So Karan, let's say I've been running on-prem for years and I have a bunch of file-based workloads that need to expand to the cloud. Given the solutions that are on the market today, what can I expect to see as I start to assess my options?
Great question. So let's talk about cloud versus on-premises. And the way I look at the world, having lived a lot in both these worlds right now, is on-premises, a customer has a very rich set of options for a variety of their file workloads. They've got, a NetApp. They could get a pure storage system if they're looking for high performance all flash. They've got, the granddaddy of large scale unstructured data like Isilon. And then there is Qumulo, which is an extremely viable option and is adopted by 1,000+ customers worldwide. Lots of options, lots of great features that customers and workflows and applications have gotten used to. Snapshots and quotas and built-in replication, multi-protocol support, NFS, V3, V4.1, SMB2, SMB3, S3. All of these things are sort of very mature on premises. In the cloud, the cloud guys, and as Vamshi pointed out, and he's been there from day zero, it started off with the base construct around object, and object is incredibly mature. The scale and size is unbelievable. The performance as measured as sort of throughput is just mind-bogglingly fantastic. But file is a bit lacking because it's come after the fact. And this is why folks like Microsoft want to partner with it. They've got good generic file offering, but it's not quite at the same level of features and functionality or performance and scale. By the way, the same thing is true. If you look on premises, and there are lots of people who build out large scale object storage on premise, and I kind of get a little bit of a negative reaction from customers when I say object on premise is a bit of a cruel joke, because there's no way 99.9% of customers on premise can get the scale, the efficiency, the performance, the availability that the cloud guys can deliver in the object. So that's kind of the worlds which have been very different along the places, right? So what does that mean from a sort of file in the cloud point of view? It's been limited till now. So what we have done, what Qumulo has done, is taken our software, which is software only. There is no dependency on underlying hardware. So just like we can run on a variety of platforms from HP and Fujitsu and Arrow and everybody else on premises, we run natively on Azure infrastructure. We use Azure VMs, we use Azure Blob Store, we use the networking, which is native out there. And now you're able to bring all the features and functionality of the on-premise infrastructure with no compromises to the cloud, right? And that really makes it very different from a customer point of view, because it addresses a set of challenges that customers have with this split world of object on premises and file on cloud. In fact, the gentleman who asked the question of, hey, how do I deal with 500 gigabytes to 10 terabytes of file in the cloud? Well, it's kind of hard because you got to write software to pull all of that off the object store, stage it locally, and have your applications run, and that's cumbersome. Whereas when you have a real file system, it can do exactly what was done on board. So it addresses the issue of sharing data between file and object because it collapses that on-premise as well as in the cloud. It allows you to really do these hybrid workflows like Bob was talking about. It gives you a single pane of glass, a single set of management tools on premises as well as in the cloud. And really, you no longer have to worry about the sort of things that Robert was asking about, which is, hey, how do I run these large files? It's exactly the way you do it today. And that's kind of what we have done here.
And to stem off that, Karan, right? Vamshi, Microsoft obviously has fully embraced the hybrid cloud world and leaned in on the worldview. It's not either or, but both. So what do you see customers doing today and in the future with regards to hybrid, right? Will it be 50-50? Mostly in the cloud, or will substantial workflows remain on-prem?
Yeah, thanks, Susanna. It really, it really depends on the customer, and I think the reality is we have to meet customer scenarios where they are. It depends on the industry, it depends on the workload. Lots of cases, data is generated on premises. And is stored or processed at the edge. So we very much believe, if you're thinking about, IoT data or manufacturing data or sensor data or things like the subsurface data, it's gathered out, in remote places on ships and other places where you're going and getting this seismic data and you're bringing it in. So I think there's always this kind of, back and forth. Kiran talked earlier about gene sequencing. Those sequencers are on premises, right? And they're created there. The data is captured there. You do some level of processing. You bring it into the cloud. You do further HPC jobs, and then you take it back. You take the results back because the researchers that are looking at the output of these jobs are in various places across the world. So there's really this kind of back and forth, and it's not just sort of one way, unidirectional either. It's often bidirectional. So we think of this as, ideally we have the same experience for customers, whether they're on premises, whether they're in the cloud. And then that's one of the reasons, in some senses, we partner with Qumulo, because they have this long, rich history of being file system folks and file system folks on premises. So if you can provide together that same unified experience across on-premises and cloud, easy movement of data, that's a huge win for customers that don't have to deal with all of these complexities of managing data and moving data, and still have all of the ease of use and enterprise features of the file system offering built on top of object and scalable object. Thank
you, Vamshi.
I have a quick question or a quick sort of ask, because I'm looking at the time and I'm eager to go get the teams to look at the and get a feel and a demo for that. But before we jump into that, can I just add to one thing that Vamshi said on this cloud and hybrid? Especially in the last year or 2 years, I have had customers who have been on premise for the longest period of time and run very large infrastructure. You're talking hundreds of petabytes, tens of thousands of cores of compute, rich jobs of a variety of different sorts. And I've always consistently felt that they could do it cheaper on premises as compared to the cloud. I have seen more and more of them, essentially, I'd say, throw in the towel. And the reason they're throwing in the towel is they're looking at the total cost of ownership of all of their workflows, not just, one particular feature, right? And one of them said, yes, I can do storage or I can do compute sort of more effectively and cost effectively on premise, but my users across the variety of workflows and applications need access to services that are only available in the cloud. Talk about the latest GPU instances, the latest sort of ML models that are available to go, that they can feed their data into in a proprietary way and generate inference engines. These things are only available in the cloud. Sure, a small number of people can sort of build that on premise, but that's not accessible to 99.9%. And I've heard this statement across all of our verticals more and more in the last 1 month. And I think that's kind of where we come to riff off what Vamshi said. It's both worlds, and we want to be there for our customers, either or, right? So with that, Dak, do you want to kind of walk us through exactly what is Azure Native Qumulo, sort of show a demo, walk us through things, Dak?
Yeah, let me kick off a demo so we can let that bake in the background. Let me just share my screen. Okay, so I assume you all can see that well. Thumbs up, Kiran?
Yes, we see it.
Okay. So here I am in Azure's portal. This is the workhorse, if you will, from a UI perspective for Azure. I'm just going to go to the storage category, and you'll see Azure Native Qumulo right here. I'll click on that. You can see I've already got a couple of clusters up in this subscription. So I'm just going to go create a new service. I'm going to use my same subscription, and I choose a resource group. So I've already got a resource group called ANQ DRB. That's really original, Azure Native Qumulo with my initials. If you don't have a resource group created, you can click Create New. It'll just ask you for a name for a new resource group. You then name the resource. We'll name this one Webinar ANQ. And we'll put that in West US 2 for a region. And I'll stick that in Zone 1. And then I need a password for my admin account here. Okay, I can still type today, so that's good. And then it's a choice of standard class performance or the high performance class. I'm going to stick with standard. I know that meets my workload needs. And we'll show you this a bit more later when we talk about pricing, but you'll notice there's a link right here to our pricing and sizing calculator. So you can get to that here through the portal. You can also get to that from our marketplace offering. But just to move forward with this demo, 300 terabyte standard level performance. There's one public pricing plan, Azure Native Qumulo. That's all there is to this first page. I'm going to click on networking, select my VNet, and the subnet that I have delegated for us to inject Enix into. All should make sense. And then custom tags. I'll just tag this up with webinar, and that's all there is to it. You can see that I've chosen a resource group in my subscription here. I've named it Webinar ANQ for the service, put it in US West 2, standard class, 300 terabyte. And I've put it in a VNet called ANQ-DRB, and a subnet I named ANQ delegated with a /24 mask. I click create, and it is off to the races. So
Hey,
that'll take about 12 minutes to deploy. So it's never fun to watch the pot boil. I'll hand it back to you, Kieran.
Hey, Dak, I have a couple of questions. I'm super excited about this. I love it. So talk us through, what is it that a customer who looks at that, if I were to go log into portal.azure.com, do I see that? Do I need any other privileges or permissions from my Azure sort of account admin? Walk us through what that look like for any of our attendees today who want to go try that right now. And then just walk us through that if you don't mind.
Yeah, as long as you've got an Azure account, that's all you need. You can go straight to the portal, and you will see Qumulo in the portal. The portal is always in various stages of rollout. So if you go to the storage category and you don't see Azure native Qumulo, you can go to the search bar. I'll just show you quickly. Let's go back to all services. Let's say I didn't want to go to the storage category. I could just type Qumulo. You'll see our service pop up. I could type SMB. You'll see us pop up. I could type NAS. You'll see us pop up. Microsoft's done an excellent job supporting us in the portal here with Azure native Qumulo. So easy to find the service. In good UI terms, 3 ways to do everything, right? So you can search it, you can go through the categorization, I can't say that, the categorization engine, whatever your desired methodology is. Click on that and then click create. If you have not created a service in the past, you won't see a list here. You'll just see a great big blue button at the bottom that says create an Azure native Qumulo service.
Cool. So what if a customer or one of our attendees here has not done this, has not done Azure, set up something at all, but they are interested? In other words, they are new to Azure too. And with some of our customers, they still are, and prospects we talked about, still sort of beginning their cloud journey. In that case, how do you suggest that they proceed? Can they just call you? Do they call Azure? How do we get them started? How do we get this, T = 0 starting done for many of our prospects and customers?
Yeah, so if you're brand new to Azure, I suggest you look at our Azure Marketplace offering. I've flipped over to that tab here. You will see that's our offer in Marketplace. You see it's got 3 tabs, like most offers: overview, plans and pricing, ratings and reviews, benefits, and a quick video to watch. If you have questions, you can reach out to us at azure@qumulo.com or do a form fill if you so choose. So feel free to reach out to us at azure.qumulo.com or azure@qumulo.com. If you have any questions, we'll get right back to you. This is always a good place to start. Lets you review the offer that you accept and deploy.
Hey, Bob, I'm curious, who else did you evaluate and why did you choose ANQ?
Sorry about that. Yeah, we looked at Azure. We looked at their blob storage, and performance there. I mean, we noticed there were some issues that we kind of ran into with our build system with with Azure file system. Looked at NetApp, and we started going down the path enough. We actually didn't quite make it all the way through that that POC, but really what it came down to is with Qumulo's performance that we saw during our proof of concept is it gave us what we needed, and the cost, we just couldn't meet it from doing some of our own research. So it really just fit the bill.
So Bob, I know that you guys got started before we had the formal provisioning as a part of the portal. So thank you for being an early customer. By the way, the engine was all the same, has not changed, but it's really the provisioning and making it really simple. So since we rolled out the provisioning directly from portal.azure, have you or anybody on your team had a reason or a chance to sort of get going and just go click, click, click like Dak is showing right now? And have you guys
it's
done
literally,
that?
I mean, it's literally that quick. When we worked with Qumulo, with the integration team with you guys, and, literally just we set up, the VNet peering on our end. Qumulo came in, made sure we tied, accepted their invite from their side, and it was literally like it was minutes. It doesn't take long to get integrated. So
cool. And you just said the magic words, VNet peering. I have a feeling that for many people, this is going to be, what on earth is that? So Dak and Vamshi, do you guys want to jump in and talk about what VNet peering is and why it's so cool and really critical for security from a customer point of view?
Yeah, I'd be happy to start that
Please.
discussion off. What we have added with the general availability of Azure native Qumulo is actually something called VNet injection. VNet injection removes the need / requirement for VNet peering. So when you saw me deploy the cluster in a Qumulo dedicated tenancy model for the service, you saw me pick a delegated subnet. That's the subnet that the NICs are injected into in your VNet. That's VNet injection. It's unique to Azure. It's highly differentiated, and it's fundamentally part of the Azure stack that's deployed and distributed globally. What are the benefits of that? There are no charges for traffic that traverses those VNet injected NICs. VNet peering has bidirectional charges. So that's really important to make the price very predictable for the Azure native Qumulo service. You don't pay any charges for traffic traversing those NICs. There's no need to coordinate IP address space. So you can pick any private subnet with any mask that you so choose in your VNet. You don't have to coordinate with what we do on the back end of the service. That allows you to have that free, simple, easy deployment model. And then from an InfoSec perspective, a lot of InfoSec teams are very sensitive to the security ramifications of VNet peering. So with VNet injection, you get to put standard NSGs, network security groups, against that subnet. So you can restrict it based on ports, IP addresses, subnets, and the like, as well as put third-party devices in your VNet, like firewalls, what have you, if you choose to secure it via that manner.
Hey Dak. So obviously we know that this works for gaming studios, right? Bob as our customer here, but I do want to shed some light to our audience here. But what other industries can leverage A&Q?
Yeah, let me just flip back to Marketplace here. Right here. So here in Marketplace, you'll see this video, which again, I'll put a call out there. If you have a chance, go watch that. It's a good video. There's also a diagram here against industry use cases. So I'll just talk through the top 3 to give you some context and a feel for where we see Azure native Qumulo deployed and in production. In the energy and resources space, oil and gas, if you will, that subsurface modeling workload, very large data sets where oil and gas companies are looking for where they may drill next or where they may do subsequent well optimization with additional resource extraction. We see big data sets there, very file intensive workloads. In the life sciences space that we've mentioned, genomics pipelines, a little bit more color on that. Whether you're using something like Illumina's Dragon or a bespoke pipeline built on something more open source like GATK, we have workloads in all of those genomics workflows. So tons of data. The simple story is that with our performance and our single namespace, we're able to let people process twice the genomes in the same amount of time, or half the time for a fixed number of genomes. So that reduces their costs for overall genomic processing. And then there's digital pathology. This one is kind of exciting because it's more an emerging space in life sciences, enabled by digital microscopy. So what digital pathology is a whole bunch of images coming off of slides. A lot of times the value prop there for digital pathology is to be able to train those workloads on-prem, take the data, then move it to the cloud and let AI go process it, because the industry knows that the machines are more accurate at predicting and diagnosing 80% of the images than humans. And then for the 20% that the machine can't do, they hand off to humans. And then there's healthcare. This is a huge space in Azure where PACS workloads on-prem. So those are picture and archiving systems. It's a traditional name for digital medical imaging, whether that's all the way from X-rays through MRIs, like Kiran spoke about. Picture or imagine, I should say, all of those imaging systems aggregating their content into a vendor-neutral archive so that healthcare provider can share those results with other healthcare entities in the service of a given patient. And Epic Blob. Epic's extremely common in the healthcare space. Blob, Epic Blob complements the database. So Epic Blob's all the unstructured data in support of that workload. They often will move this entirely to Azure, or they will look at it from a DR perspective and make their first step into the cloud using ANQ for disaster recovery for Epic Blob. That's really important in their Epic contract to have a strong disaster recovery posture. And that leads me to the blue arrow here, where you see that regardless of industry vertical, you can leverage DR in any of these workloads because it is a hybrid world, as a first step before you've even moved full-blown workloads to the cloud. With that, I would, I won't talk about gaming because Bob has spoken about that a fair amount. It's really build environment, DevOps centric, as he really laid out for you all. So back to you, Susanna.
Thank you, Jack. Yeah, so to elaborate a little bit more, and I know this is probably top of mind to a lot of my customers, right? How does the billing exactly work for Azure native Qumulo customers?
It's super simple. On your Azure bill, you get one line item that says Azure native Qumulo. That's inclusive of the Azure infrastructure that we are hosting the service on and the Qumulo software license. So it's super predictable because it's just straight capacity based, and there are no transaction charges. So predictable pricing, one line item on your bill, all inclusive for the service.
Wow. Okay, that's all. So there's no transaction costs. Like, a lot of my customers worry about surcharges, ingress and egress costs. Any of that?
So let me just clarify. When I say there are no transaction costs, some file offerings have charges for writes and reads, and if you have what we see commonly on Azure, 100 million plus files and an active workload, those things start to add up. None of those charges are relevant or apply in the Azure native Qumulo offering. You have that free VNet injected connection, write and read to the heart's content. We have customers in Azure with billions of files. So no transaction charges there. If you are pulling data out of Azure, that would be traditional Azure egress. So it'll still be a charge for that. That's not something we control as a service offering in Azure.
And
Hey,
how is the, oh, sorry. Go
Sorry,
ahead,
I
Ron.
want to get Vamshi to talk about VNet injection because that's unique to Azure. You want to walk us through why you guys did that and how that's truly differentiated compared to all other cloud offerings?
Yeah, absolutely, Kiran. And Dak summed it up really well earlier when he talked about VNet injection and the benefits it brings. For us, that's really the key, right? Is it making it painless and easy to have that conversation between your storage or other resources and your applications and workloads. And this makes it really easy and possible. And the key there is secure, right? Like, you can always stand up a public internet facing service and have everything talk to it, or you can even stand up something that's Azure, facing, but it's not scoped down to your resources or your subnet. And that's a huge security challenge, especially when it comes to enterprise file workloads. Your CISO, your security folks are going to be really, really unhappy if that's the use case or model that we have. And this just takes care of that in a very elegant way. And it's a big part of that secret sauce that has us providing that Azure native tag to Qumulo, because it really is highly differentiated for when you do the co-engineering work to get all of that working. It looks like magic, right? It's like an Azure service. You just click on it, you go, your file share is whack something available to your applications, available to your compute workloads. That for us is a really that differentiation. And that then touched on the second part. Billing is easy, right? And it's not just one thing, including transactions. It's on your Azure bill, right? So your company enterprise has already negotiated an Azure enterprise agreement and all of that. You can just have that billing relationship, those budgets, those quotas, all of those things, just taken care of. It's a line item on your Azure bill. You're using what you use, and you get billed for it, and you're done. There's not like this, onerous procurement process and all of that, and multiple vendors and relationships and all of that. That's another thing that we looked at, together with Qumulo and Azure. Just make that as simple as possible, make it friction-free.
Yeah,
Hey,
and I would just
Vansh,
add, Vamshi, that sometimes we forget to mention this because it's so top of mind all the time. But should you choose to purchase Azure native Qumulo, of course, it transacts through the marketplace, as we've spoken about, but it also retires your Mac, right? Your Microsoft consumption commitment. So that's also really important for customers as they look at the financial model.
Right? In all respects, it behaves like an Azure service, which is great.
hey guys, so we actually have a question from the audience here. So while we're on the topic, does per terabyte cost include storage, backup, snapshots, recovery costs in Azure? And what is the SLA?
Okay, so can you repeat that question?
Sure. Does per terabyte cost include storage, backup, snapshots, recovery costs in Azure? And what is SLA?
Yes. So your deployed capacity, you can consume as much of that as you want with snapshots. It's all included it's all about your deployed usable capacity. So your snapshots are in essence free unless you have large amounts of deletes. Your snapshot policies you have full control of. So that's another thing about the Azure native Qumulo service, is that you get to control your snapshot policies, the frequency with which you snap the file system, when you age those snapshots out.
Thank you, Dak. And Vamshi, so can you tell us about the Azure Native ISV program? In light of the challenges that Karan and Bob have both addressed, how does the ISV program address some of those challenges?
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is, kind of what we were both touching on, Dak and I. It really is about making an ISV led experience like Qumulo, where they have the right software and IP to make file workflows and file systems easy, look and feel like an Azure native service, right? It'll be fully integrated from a security perspective, from a networking perspective, from a ease of use and deployment perspective, as Dak just showed you how easy it was to kind of go deploy. That, by the way, that workflow Dak walked you through is exactly how you deploy Azure storage, right? You go, you create your resource, you say which region you want it in, and you click, new and create, and a couple of minutes later, we've provisioned your storage for you in the region you asked for it. So it's exactly the same, because Qumulo is built on top of that software stack, but now the provisioning and everything looks the same. So I think, it's the engineering to kind of make that easy for customers. It's the commercial part of it that we talked about. There's also a question about egress, and hey, like how do we think about egress, because that is one of the big pain points for customers. This integration that we have, one, inside an Azure region, if your VMs and containers are in that region, the VNet injection takes care of it. But if you're egressing data to your Qumulo on-prem or doing something else with it, this allows you to kind of stand up something like ExpressRoute or ExpressRoute Direct, and have either a much lower per GB cost if you want to kind of go pay as you go, or you can actually kind of go provision like a fixed line. You can go get a 1 Gbps line for a few $1,000s a month, or you can go get a smaller line. You can essentially provision a virtual dedicated circuit and not pay any egress costs. Right? It's a fixed known cost. It's something you are paying for it, but you can budget for it. So that is another thing that you can look at, and you say, how do I make this as close to being like the VNet is great, gets me the secure link. How do I get that secure link back to my premises? How do I make sure the egress is accounted for, so I don't have to worry about my users moving data back and forth and getting hit with a bill in the tens of thousands of dollars? Those things are also already stitched together. And I think that for us is we have a very small number of ISVs we call Azure native ISVs. Qumulo is the first file workload ISV in that space. And we're really happy to see how seamless and neat that looks for customers. And we're excited to have customers use it and give us feedback on what else we can improve there.
Hey, thanks a lot, Vamshi. That was great. I have one follow-up, one question which came up that I really am eager to answer. The question is, I see in your documentation that an ANQ resource is currently supported in all public US regions. Are there plans to allow deployments of an ANQ resource in other global Azure regions? Absolutely, yes. It is a work in progress, and stay tuned. We are focusing in terms of orders. Dak and the team have a long list, but it's Germany, it's France, it's UK, it's Canada, it's the EMEA, it's the APAC world afterwards. That's what we have, a systematic plan. And the only reason it's not right off the bat is there is both legal obligations as a storage as a service provider inside a public cloud. And of course, we got to stand up the provisioning software. Microsoft will help us with the provisioning software in all the other regions. And it's all happening. So stay tuned. You're talking about, weeks to months, not months to quarters on that front. Thank you. And I want to go chat with sort of Bob. There was this conversation, you're in a hybrid workflow. And, do you feel any pressure with regards to this? This egress charge is always something that typically people early in their cloud journey sort of get massively stressed out. And to be fair, that is a lot of the FUD that a legacy on-premise infrastructure vendor, your old big box vendors, would throw at a customer. So I want to get your take on what's your perspective. How have you dealt with that?
Egress, well, we got to keep a business running, right? A lot of our egress traffic that we've had on Azure, when it comes to our employees being able to move data in between, the work machine, at home, or even on site in those regards. For you guys mentioned earlier that about having ExpressRoute. So our internal users, we are leveraging an ExpressRoute. So we leverage ExpressRoute in order to transfer data in between Azure East and our home office in Alpharetta. So egress traffic, you know, it's a fixed cost for us, so that's something that works for us. But for our users abroad, we do, you know, incur a size, you know, a fairly sizable amount of egress network traffic on that, and that can vary really. It just depends on what our pipelines are for the month. You know, for you know, if we have a new marketing thing that we're going to be doing for in the middle of, you know, May, and you know, we have to, you know, do some builds, you know, prior to then. We're going to have our users from abroad just, you know, going in and pulling data. That's going to change, and that's just a, you know, that's a cost we got to eat. So I mean, it's just that's something, you know, that we have to deal with. So it's not really many ways around that for us, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you, Bob. So Dak, let's see this new instance. You know, how long did it take? How do we know it worked? You know, what can customers expect to see?
Can you
Yes,
share your screen again?
I'm sharing. So you'll see in the tabs here, here's the service. It's complete and up. I didn't time it because I was paying attention to the webinar. But in all of the cases where I have timed it, it's 12 minutes and change from the time you hit deploy. Once it's deployed, you see this screen. You can click on IP addresses. You'll see the list of injected ENICs here into that subnet that you chose. Take any IP address, pop in. I just chose 1.11, and I'm going to log into this new instance. If I can remember the password I gave it. So just to confirm that we got what we asked for, it's named Webinar ANQ. You see 300 terabytes of available capacity right here. Just a rounding error of metadata to lay out the file system. And it's a brand new file system. So there's no directories, no files, no data has been populated. This is what it's going to look like the instant after you deploy it and log in for the first time. From there, you can just simply go create SMB shares or NFS exports, set up quotas. You know, you can join it to Active Directory. And by the way, we have documentation. You'll see it in Marketplace, where you can federate that with AD on-prem, or you could use Azure Active Directory domain services. That's all documented, along with two-factor authentication. So everything you're used to with Qumulo on-prem, you get that same feature functionality here with our Azure native Qumulo service. And customers just love that because as they go on their journey, they've got one common UI, CLI, API for the service.
Hey, appreciate it. I'm super respectful of people's time and the panelists' time because we are already at 7 minutes past the hour. And if you don't mind, Susanna, can I close it out in a couple of things? So first off, what I would like to do is say, hey, thank you very much to the panelists. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Vamshi, for attending and taking the time out of your day. Thanks a bunch to our participants who have taken the time out of their day to go join us for this. A couple of things that I leave you with. Any questions that you have, you can reach out to us directly. If I can figure out how to share the screen again, I will do that. You can reach out to your support team. You can provide us feedback. Reach out to sales@qumulo.com. You can reach out to any of us. My email is kbageshpur@qumulo.com. You can reach out to Dak Bush, who is dbush, B-U-S-C-H @qumulo.com. Happy to answer questions, happy to go take into the next level. I see more questions have come in. And I want to leave one final thought for people to think about. Number one, the beauty of the cloud is constantly the cloud teams like the ones at Azure have driven down the unit cost of what it costs to spin up an instance of CP, of instance of VM, or a byte of storage in the cloud. It's constant. If you look in the last 15 years, there has been a precipitous decline in the unit economics, even as the usage has absolutely exploded. We intend to absolutely sort of toe to that line, if you will. So stay tuned as we go through this year and into the early part of next year to see very substantial improvements in the economics. And our vision for the folks who are still around is to bring on-premise economics of file workloads to the cloud. And we are only able to do that by partnering with folks like Microsoft, and we are very excited about that. And by the way, all of our existing customers who are on Azure in the current version will automatically get a drop in their price, just like they do with any other service on Azure. So Bob, we've got you covered on that front. As we can go get it down, your price drops too. And we are very excited about that. So once again, thanks a lot to everybody for joining us, and have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, folks.